Good morning, everybody. My name is Laura O'Reilly, and I am the Executive Director of the North Jersey Health Collaborative. The North Jersey Health Collaborative is an organization that handles the Community Health Improvement Plan and the Community Health Needs Assessments for local public health across Morris, Passaic, Sussex, Union, and Warren counties. Chronic disease and cancer are a big piece of what we do, and we address that by engaging community agencies with healthcare and public health to identify the most pressing needs in the community and address them. Now, AIDS, HIV/AIDS, is a virus. Well, let's start with HIV. HIV is a virus that attacks cells that help the body fight infection, right? It's a viral infection that attacks the immune system and causes AIDS. And according to the World Health Organization, HIV continues to be a major global public health issue. There is no cure for HIV. However, with increasing access to effective HIV prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and care, including for opportunistic infections, HIV infection has become a manageable chronic health condition, enabling people who are living with HIV to lead long and healthy lives. So as we're doing our community health improvement planning process and we're bringing people together to address chronic issues, we thought it was really important to bring HIV to the forefront of our conversation. We have a very special guest today who's been very generous of spirit to share his personal story. Robert Armstrong has been living with AIDS for 27 years. He's been active in many HIV-related activities, including serving on the Human Services Advisory Council of Morris County, the Morris Sussex Warren HIV Advisory Committee, and the NEMA HIV Health Services Planning Council. Through the Hyacinth AIDS Foundation Speakers Bureau, he has spoken about his AIDS experiences to a broad spectrum of audiences over the past 15 years. He has been part of the HIV positive community in Morris County through EDGE New Jersey. And I would just like to share that EDGE New Jersey's mission is to respond compassionately and responsibly to those living with HIV, those at risk, and the LGBTQ plus communities by providing support services in the community. So again, he's been part of the HIV positive community in Morris County through EDGE New Jersey in Denville and Catholic Charities Hope House in Dover. Robert graduated from the State University of New York at Buffalo School of Medicine and elected not to practice medicine, but has pursued a range of other interests. He currently works part-time at EDGE New Jersey in Denville. He's an artist and he lives in Morristown. So interestingly, when Bob and I were talking, though he did not pursue a degree in medicine and did not become a doctor, he learned a lot about medicine and he's going to share that with us today. So with no further ado, I would like to again ask you to please change your view to speaker view so you could see more of Bob. And I'll hand it over to Bob. Take it away, Bob.
Yes, good morning. Welcome. Am I placed all right in the center of the picture? I can't see myself, Laura. Is my adjusted correctly?
Yes, you're good. We see you. You're centered beautifully.
Okay, good. So, thank you for being here. I would like to talk about when I was diagnosed with AIDS in 1995. And I was in my hospital room with pneumonia, alone, and 5 or 6 doctors filed into the room. And the youngest, the resident who had admitted me, said to me, "Our test result shows that you have PCP, which is a particular kind of pneumonia that is only, it's a diagnosis for AIDS. And so you have AIDS. And your T cell count is 6. Now the normal range is about 360 to 1500. So my immune system at this point was virtually destroyed. And they filed out, and I was left in my room for an hour, and I was absorbing this, and I had a number of recollections, and I came to the conclusion that I was going to live. That was my conclusion. And in came my parents an hour later, and I told them that I have AIDS, and it just deflated them. And then I said, but don't worry, I'm going to live. So a few days later, the HIV coordinator at the hospital took my family aside, and I have two sisters also, and told them that I was going to die and to prepare for it. And she told them compassionately. So 14 years now into the epidemic, still it was a death sentence. And I've been involved with the AIDS epidemic from the very beginning, because in 1981, when the epidemic showed its face, I was living in New York City with my partner, Peter. And I was a queer man. Now, I use the word queer as an umbrella term for LGBTQ plus. And I had just turned 30. I was out. I had been closeted completely as a youth, and the queer scene was happening in New York at the time. It was just bursting after many years of oppression. And a friend said to me, "Oh, I'm the first one on the block. I'm the first one. I have the gay leg." And that's what he called it. And some months later, I don't remember how many months, I decided to visit him unannounced in the hospital. And the nurse took me to him where he was sitting in a wheelchair, and I walked right past him, and I didn't recognize him. I'm really not sure to this day that it was really him, although that's what he was identified as. And his hair was white and thinning, and he was gaunt, and his eyes were sunken, and his skin was blotchy, and he was emaciated. And he saw me, and he froze in mortification, and his dentures kind of dropped a little bit. For my entire visit, he didn't say a word, and he didn't move. And shortly thereafter, he died. And this began to happen to me, one after the other. I knew someone, and they got AIDS, and they died. And I remember visiting another mutual friend with my best friend, James, and I went to see a mutual friend and in the hospital. And the mutual friend and my best friend, James, both died of AIDS. And my dearest and my closest friends died of AIDS over the years. So this had a significant impact on my generation of gay men. I'm a baby boomer. I took a big chunk out of it. And they're gone. At the time, the beginning of this epidemic, people with AIDS were social outcasts because no one knew how it was transmitted. There was a great deal of fear, and we were the lepers of today, so to speak. And they had to set up a special ward in New York City at St. Vincent's Hospital. Services were really not available in a compassionate way in many places. Loss was everywhere in our community. It was appearing in several marginalized communities. Queer men mostly, but also IV drug users. And HIV was disproportionately infecting the Black and Latino communities in higher numbers. there was a stigma, very strong, much abandonment, tragedy, horror, death. So by the time I was diagnosed in 1995, things had significantly improved in terms of our knowledge of transmission, in terms of the way people were treated, in terms of testing. Yet still there was no vaccine, no life-saving medications at this point, nor a cure. And so people, mostly queer men, were still dying. And I was expected to also. My partner Peter and I had been living in Massachusetts. I had been tested and diagnosed in Morristown, New Jersey. And while I was visiting my folks, Peter had to go back and take care of things in Massachusetts. And I moved in with my parents for a while. My folks and my two sisters were incredibly compassionate and loving to me. And this was not usually the case. A lot of people were thrown out of their homes and rejected by their families in their hour of greatest need. But my parents had a prerequisite for me to stay at home, and that was that I couldn't tell anybody that they knew. I could tell my friends, but not anyone who they knew, because our two worlds hardly ever intersected. And our tradition, someone is is not muted. Could you please mute?
Yes, I'm going to go through and mute anybody who's unmuted. Thank you, Bob.
Okay, thanks. So I came from a very strong religious tradition that taught that homosexuality is one of the most wicked sins, and that AIDS was God's punishment for wickedness. And so I was not to tell anyone they knew, not even my aunts or uncles or cousins. And the odd thing was that my mother secretly told her brother, who then told everybody, but don't tell that you know. And, you know, such is the ridiculousness of secrets played out in our family. So for over a year, I was in and out of the hospital on a regular basis with multiple infections. I had pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, PCP, 5 times, viral pneumonia, cryptococcal meningitis, and viral meningitis. Each one bringing me to the brink of death. And after my first bout of PCP, and I got through it, Peter and I drove to Florida to get into warm weather so I wouldn't get pneumonia again. It was what we thought would be the best thing to do. And a friend lent her seaside room to us, and another friend from Fort Lauderdale, who has since died of AIDS, hooked me up with a Cuban herbologist, and he concocted Cuban remedies. I would not take AZT at the time because everyone I knew who took AZT died and got sicker. So I elected not to take that route. And so I was taking daily herbal concoctions, and yet the symptoms returned, and I felt the pneumonia coming on, and I had a fever, and I knew I was in trouble, but I did not want to go to the hospital. I did not want to go deal with it. I went into denial. You know, these concoctions will save me. But my mother finally flew down to Florida and got me to go to a pulmonologist. He took an x-ray and said, you have to go to the nearest hospital. It's several blocks away, going to an HIV specialized hospital where they have the services in Miami is too long a distance, and I don't think he'll make it. So I went. So I went to this nearby hospital, and I languished there for 2 weeks, not getting better, dangerously low blood oxygen levels, and Peter visited me every day. And while he was visiting me, the doctor, the infectious disease doctor, came in and said, "We need to take a lung biopsy." And both Peter and I felt that I wouldn't even be able to survive such a simple procedure. And Peter just blew up at the guy, at the doctor, and started yelling at him, "Get out, get out." We were just desperate. And he left, and we devised to get out of there. And I told them, "Oh, I'm doing great, you know," and they're like, "Right." And I tried to walk around the ward, and I got just discharged, and I got to the front door entrance of the hospital in a wheelchair, and I was able to walk to the curb, but I didn't think I could step off the curb. I just was not, I was terrified to do that. But you know, somehow I made it, and I made it to the car, and we drove north. And on the way, I got a terrible fever, and it's hard to breathe because I wasn't on oxygen. But we got to Morristown Memorial Hospital, which is what it was called then. It's now Morristown Medical Center. And I was admitted, and I got through that bout of PCP, which was something I expected and hoped, because I had such excellent care at that hospital. It was such a contrast to the other hospital. And my hospital visits were hospital stays were usually typically weeks long. And I frequently had a fever during this period. And when I had a fever, I couldn't eat. It's just not, my appetite disappeared. And so I started losing weight. And I had a fever a lot. And I was up and down. You know, when I got out of the hospital, I felt better. I was up and about. I didn't have an infection. But when I was in the hospital, I was flat on my back. Peter and I moved into an apartment in Morristown. And when I was well enough, I attended a gay men's HIV positive support group at Hope House in Dover, and received social services through that agency. And typically at that time, when I arrived at the weekly meeting, there was someone who wasn't there. You know, someone had passed during the week. I felt shame for having AIDS. I felt that the stigma had internalized with me, and that happens. It perpetuates, the stigma is perpetuated by the person who is stigmatized frequently. And so I felt shame about my religious tradition and being educated with an MD and getting infected. And I had studied an energy healing modality in Japan, and I was ashamed that now who am I to say I'm a healer when I have AIDS? It was something that pulled me down. However, my medical education, I feel, is crucial to my survival. I understood the reasons for the medical decisions, and I knew what the lab tests meant. I was able to navigate the system better than other patients. I anticipated the next thing. I adapted to change, which was constant. And I remember getting so feverish during my hospitalizations that episodes of my life would come to me with such clarity. It was like I was watching these episodes of my life from like in a movie. And it was clear and honest. And I saw my role in things. I saw it completely differently. And, you know, in later years, this life review has been of great value to me. So that was a big value that came out of it. My father showed me an article in the Daily Record regarding a new medication that was in clinical trials that showed lots of promise for HIV called protease inhibitors. And I got so angry at him for showing it to me. This is where I was in a point of discouragement. You know, how dare you show me something to give me false hope? You know, that was where I was at. We heard a lot about protease inhibitors, the new medication, and there was much effort to get them be released early. Organization of ACT UP, comprised mostly of queer men, were instrumental in getting the medication available to patients as soon as possible. Peter went to my infectious disease specialist and said, "You've got to get this to him ahead of time. He has to have it now. He's not going to make it." And so she did. She contacted the pharmaceutical company and made a case that this was an emergency, and they released the protease inhibitor to me ahead of time. It wasn't available in the pharmacies yet, and I got it through the hospital pharmacy, which wasn't set up for outpatients. And suddenly I had hope, you know, oh, this is it. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get through. And I took the pill and I threw it up. And then all my hope was dashed. You know, oh, great. My last hope, and I can't even keep it down. I'm too sick to eat these pills. They make me so nauseous. So that night, I went to my regular appointment with a hands-on healer in Sussex County. And he did his treatment, and I always felt better after his treatment. And I felt better. And I told him the story about the pill. And so his wife said, "Where's the pill?" So I got the pill, and she put it in my hand, and she said, "Now, cup your hand like this." And then everybody cupped their hands around mine, and she said, "This is going to work. This is going to work." And we all concentrated. This is going to work. And she goes, "Okay, now take it." And I took it, and I was horribly nauseous, but I kept it down. And she said, "Do that every time. You know, this is going to work." And so I never threw it up again. I believed it was going to work. And I started to get better. I started to get really better. I still got infections. I still had hospitalizations, but the hospitalizations were farther and fewer between time periods of being well, and they were less severe. But I did get heavy-duty infections. I got pancreatitis and GI infection. And my T cells stayed below 200 for 10 more years. Now, 200 is the danger zone is below 200. In fact, that is one of the criteria for diagnosing a person with AIDS, as opposed to just being HIV positive. So I was in the danger zone for more than 10 years. But I took my medication every day. The stigma persisted. My friends still died. not as regularly. People with HIV are very private about it. Confidentiality is important. Don't want anybody to know. And there's good reason for it because of the stigma. You know, there are valid concerns about housing and employment. And we became, and we are, in a sense, an invisible population, you know, under the radar. But I decided, because at this point, what do I have to lose? I'm alive. I'm on borrowed time. I was going to be open about it. I was going to let people know I have AIDS, you know. And I returned to a somewhat active life. I had mental health counseling. I accessed services, support services through Edge, New Jersey, and through Hope House in Dover. I became active in the Human Services Advisory Council of Morris County, and also the Newark EMA HIV Health Services Planning Council, the Morris Sussex Warren HIV Advisory Committee, and through a speakers bureau that Hyacinth had, I spoke in mostly high school health classes, but all over the place for over 15 years, and shared my story and taught HIV 101, you know, how you can get it and how you can't get it.
Robert, I'm sorry to interrupt. Looks like your video has been turned off. Is there any way you can turn it back on?
Oh, sure, yes.
The good
I'm
news
sorry.
is there you go. There's an excellent photo of you that was front and center on the screen while you were just talking. And so it's beautiful. So please keep that and continue. Thank you.
Okay, just let me know when that happens again, and I just
Absolutely.
sometimes does that. I had depression. These are the things that people living with HIV deal with. I had depression. I had been treated for that. I had post-traumatic stress reactions, mental health issues. But I started painting, which was my passion, and I painted watercolors, and I exhibited and sold them in an art gallery for years. I worked at Eric Johnson House, which was transitional housing for people living with HIV. It was another insight into the marginalized societies. I worked at night and I heard such great stories. So I was so privileged to hear people pour their hearts out to me about what they had to deal with, and they're just incredible. I'm so grateful for that. So today, there are many challenges for people living with HIV still, many health issues. Worldwide, 35 million people have died of AIDS since 1981. Worldwide, about 680,000 people died of AIDS in 2020. And in the United States today, approximately 1.2 million people are living with HIV. And in the United States, in terms of regions, the Northeast has the highest rate of people living with HIV. New infections are on the decline. The rate of new HIV infections declined 73% since 1984. And from recent US data, new HIV infections declined 8% since 2015 and has been in decline since 1998 after the availability of protease inhibitors. And it turned out not only for me was it a turning point, but it was a turning point for the entire epidemic when protease inhibitors were released, because now there was a treatment, and it was an effective treatment. And these medications reduced the level of virus in my blood so low that you couldn't even detect it in a blood test. So that's called undetectable, and I'm currently undetectable. And T cells are still measured as a bioindicator of how the immune system is doing. It's a rough way of telling. And now my T cells have come from 6 to 513. So I'm in the normal range. This is not atypical. Now, today in New Jersey, there are almost 40,000 people living with HIV. And in Morris County, there are at the end of 2020, there were 850 odd people who live with HIV. And then today it was 875, and today it's 851. So there's a slight, after having been like level for years in Morris County, now it's going down. It's finally dropping. And there's been incredible improvement in HIV care and treatment. Great effort, great money has gone into this, and with great benefit, because so much of what the scientists learned about HIV has been able to be applied to other epidemics, and recently COVID-19. And so much of what was learned was like a foundation upon which new research could be done. And conversely, what scientists and doctors have learned from COVID-19 has been now helpful to HIV as well. So they're complementary. There is a shift in the demographics now. More and more people who are living with HIV are aging. 50 years plus, that demographic is going way up. And I'm now called a long-term survivor. And there are studies, and long-term survivors have to deal with extra medical issues, because with HIV, one develops comorbidities more frequently than the regular population. So during my recovery, I had a heart attack. So I have heart disease. That came on earlier than other people statistically. And also I have diabetes. These are common comorbidities. And I also forgot to mention that in the early days, I had a lot of side effects from my medications, which a lot of people who are long-term survivors have to deal with, especially. The medications have much less side effects now that are available, but they still have some side effects, but nothing like what the early medications had. So I have peripheral neuropathy, so my feet are numb and I'm not so steady on my feet. And I have lipodystrophy, which is a disfiguring distribution of fat in the body, where my arms and legs are thin, but there's a lot of fat accumulated even inside my abdominal cavity. So I have this huge belly, but I still could lose weight. I'm not blaming it all on that. So it's very challenging. People who are living with HIV have a higher incidence of mental health issues. And there is a lot of interaction between substance abuse and HIV, especially for people who share needles, which is how a lot of people got infected. And these are marginalized populations, which adds to the stigma and is another level of challenge for people living with HIV. So the good news is that there are now very specific and detailed plans for ending the HIV epidemic. And I was like, what? You're going to end the HIV epidemic? Well, you're right, but you know what? Let's go for it. And the new infections are dropping. And so let's just work hard to drop it down to, it's not even an epidemic anymore. It's just a low level. And so the White House has published a end the epidemic plan. And the state of New Jersey has developed a similar end the HIV epidemic plan. And on the county level also, in New Jersey, there are similar plans for ending the epidemic. And so this is the vision. I think it's very ambitious, and I believe it's possible. I want to add that for me, belief in something working was foundational, crucial to my recovery. I was able to do better when I believed it was going to work or that I was going to live. I just responded to things differently because I had that perspective. And I think it speaks to all chronic illnesses and all life-threatening diseases. And I'm grateful for that perspective at this point in time. So end the HIV epidemic. So what are we starting with? Well, who is at risk right now? In the United States, HIV is has a disproportionately large impact on minorities and men who have sex with men. And it's not all roses, according to Gilead. In some ways, progress has stalled. Too many people remain unaware of their HIV status. And that's estimated to be about 13%. There are medications for prevention. Their acronyms are PrEP and PEP. And PrEP stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis. And I wish that it wasn't prophylaxis, but it just said prevention. It would be much easier to understand. But PrEP is medication to take to prevent being infected if you are at risk. And PEP is if you think you've been exposed, post-exposure prophylaxis, then you can take medication to prevent being infected if HIV has gotten into your bloodstream. So these are tools that we have. Why is it so important to end the epidemic? Well, it's because with HIV, if everyone stopped taking their medications and didn't take care of themselves, myself included, the HIV comes back, roaring back. It's still there, hiding in interstices of your body, but it's still there, and it can become a big infection and kill the immune system again, and then people die of infections, and there we have it all over again, a resurgence of the epidemic. So it is actually an ever-present danger, and that is why so much effort is going into keeping people virally suppressed, lower amounts of virus, HIV in the bloodstream, and a chance for the body to recover. So the 4 pillars of the epidemic of HIV are diagnose, treat, prevent, and respond. And the outline of it is really very simple and based upon what we've already been doing.
Robert, sorry to interrupt. Your
Yes.
video just went out again.
Okay, thank you. How's that?
You're back. Thank you.
Okay. The sophisticated part of ending the epidemic is how to accomplish in a greater effectiveness, diagnose, treat, prevent, and respond. And this is laid out in detail in all of the levels of planning. There is a simple diagram or a simple concept that shows what the medical plan is. And these plans are based on medical plans. And it really starts with getting tested and then dividing the approach between people who test HIV negative and people who test HIV positive. And then if people are HIV negative, you're at risk of HIV exposure, there's PrEP, there's medication that can be taken, people to become aware of it, make it available to people, and take as appropriate. This is easier said than done. So that it prevents new infections. But if people are infected, and for those who are HIV positive, and you're diagnosed with HIV, then the plan is that you retain people in HIV care, hook them up to medical services, hook them up to social services, support services, which in my experience was every bit as crucial as the medical support systems. I don't think I'd be here if I didn't have the support systems. And certainly not without the medical system. So the treatment engagement is the center stone of what to do with HIV positive people and to keep their viral load suppressed, keep the amount of virus in your bloodstream as low as possible, even undetectable. So the plans are how to achieve these things. We've known these things for a long time, but really focus on the way that it can be done. And it seems that it really involves everyone to be able to support this effort because it behooves everyone to do so. This epidemic can affect all of us. And so it's really important to focus on it. So there'll be more awareness about it. And as we go into this, and there will be strategies implemented and money put towards it. And hopefully we will be able to continue to bring the new infections down, and stabilize people who are HIV positive, many from marginalized communities, to be stably housed so that we can take our medication, so have all the support systems that are needed in this crucial, important endeavor. So, I am ready to answer questions. Anyone has a question?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Bob. That was very powerful and very, very generous of you to share your very personal story. And I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say it is wonderful to hear how well you're doing and how well you reacted to the medication. I'm going to start with one question because we have some Morris County people in the house here. What year were you at Morristown Memorial Hospital when you received such great treatment? Because it's a fantastic hospital, very highly ranked, but way back when this was, you know, still a mystery illness, you had said you got great care from them.
1995 and 1996 was the period where I was in great danger, and I was in and out of the Morristown Memorial Hospital constantly, and now Morristown Medical Center. And but I also received great care in subsequent hospitalizations when I was diagnosed with pancreatitis and GI infection and other illnesses. Even I've had 3 recent hospitalizations within the last 3 years, all of which I have to say I have had fantastic care there.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear you're doing so well. Does anybody have any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or call them out. Daniel, I know you had been gathering up some questions as well.
Yeah, I can start. So Robert, thank you so much for sharing your story. What would you say would be advice you would give to someone who's been newly diagnosed with HIV today?
I would tell them there's a lot of hope right away. Have your feelings, but don't freak out. I know it's intense, but there are services available to you. And I would do my best to direct them to the services and encourage them to be engaged in treatment programs and also to access services. That's what I would do.
And you do have a list of resources that we're going to share out with the group today, and we're going to post that on our website along with a recording of this presentation. All right, Dan, have you gathered any other questions in the process?
Sure. I mean, this kind of goes to what you had just mentioned, but I was wondering if you'd be willing to share maybe some resources that you thought were the most helpful, or maybe the most helpful with you, coping with your diagnosis. What kind of social supports did you think really helped, helped you, cope with your diagnosis?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I forgot like a major thing, which is that I just compiled a list of HIV-related services in the 5 counties that the North Jersey Health Collaborative covers: Passaic County, Union County, Morris County, and Warren and Sussex counties. And so that is that will be available on the North Jersey Health Collaborative website, and you'll be able to access it there. And that lists the organizations who offer HIV services, their contact information, and what services they provide. I found personally very important was the support group. I found in retreats with HIV positive people, being connected to an HIV positive community was very important to me. It defined my identity in many ways, and it made me not feel so isolated and alone. And isolation is a big problem, especially because people don't share that they are HIV positive, and it's typical of what goes on. So that's, and then also much education. I got a lot of education through the support services, many seminars, and I learned more about it. And so those are some of the important ones for me.
Yeah, and thank you for your volunteer work. Now, you had mentioned Catholic Charities, was Catholic Charities and Edge, New Jersey. I know we have someone here from Edge. Does Edge offer services beyond the borders of Morris County? Do you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. In fact, Warren County and Sussex County mostly receive their HIV services through Morris County.
Okay.
And so that's listed on the HIV related resources. Yes, so that's a big distribution information.
Yes. And Kelly Martin's just put in the chat that Edge, New Jersey is in the works of starting an in-person support group, in person, yay, called Thrive, a group designed for newly HIV diagnosed people. So for all of you on this call, these services are available. Now I know, Kelly, we have some Passaic County people on the call. Are you still doing hybrid? Is there any way people from outside of Morris County area can still get supports from you virtually?
Thank you so much for the question. Wonderful job, Bob. It's always an honor to be in your presence. So at this time, the agency is transitioning to in-person care. We have limited hybrid services at this time. Our behavioral health counseling for people living with HIV, we have the ability to continue those services virtually, but support groups at this time, we are looking at COVID. It's a weekly, review, but our groups are in person.
Okay, which is wonderful to be back in person. So for everybody on the call today, if you in your county, if your Office of Public Health, your county public health department, or any of the agencies that you're affiliated in your community, if you know of HIV support services in your community, if you would put them in the chat, we will collect that information and add it to our resource library and share it out in the recap of this meeting. We have about 4 minutes until we end the meeting. So like I said, if your county health department, local health department, your agency, or any of your affiliates offer HIV support, please put it in the chat and we'll make sure that we include it in our resources.
Laura, it looks like we have Laura with her hand up and a message and another question in the chat. So
sure. Do you want to field those?
Yeah, sure. Laura, why don't you go first?
Hi, my name is Laura. I'm the COVID generalist at the Warren County Health Department, and my job is to reach out to people and convince them to get vaccinated. And people living with HIV, how important do you think, Robert? How important is to get them vaccinated? Do they have any reaction with the medication that they take in, or do you think they should get vaccinated for COVID?
I think that at this point in time, most people who are living with HIV are at a similar risk level to the general population. So the same efforts for getting people vaccinated for COVID-19 would go for people living with HIV, with the caveat that if one is sick and if one's immune system is down and the T cell levels are lower, definitely you should be fast-tracked to be able to get vaccinated for COVID, should you want to do that. should you elect to do that. So I was given the opportunity to be vaccinated soon, like in the first group of people, but also I'm 70 years old now. So as a senior, I was also given a fast track to get vaccinated. But, you know, it's not that different for most people living with HIV.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
We have one other question from Patrick Anderson. He says, thank you so much for this valued session. Do you have any advice or suggestions for public health departments to take today regarding HIV that may be absent?
I think it's important to keep HIV in public awareness, because as years go by, generations grow up not really hearing about it very much. It kind of disappeared because the emergency about it, you know, decreased. And so the promotion of information about it decreased. So to keep it in the public eye is somehow promote education and awareness of HIV, I think is the most important thing a health department can do.
Yeah, great answer. Thank you. Thank you, Patrick, for asking. Patrick was instrumental in helping us put together the community health needs assessment for Passaic County. So thank you. And thank you for the work that you do in public health. All right, we have 1 minute left before we wrap it up. Is there a final question? If anybody has a question, put it in the chat or shout it out. Okay, I think I covered it. And again, if you're planning on writing some resources in the chat, we could do that before the meeting ends. But at this point, thank you, Bob, for your time and your passionate presentation and your courage and your generosity of spirit. And Bob and I are on committees together, so I will be seeing you again soon. And thank you all for being here today. And thank you all for the work that you do in your communities. So I wish you all a great day, and we will be sending a follow-up out with the link to this meeting and a link to the resources that Bob has provided. Have a great day, everybody.